This is Curtis Stiner. He farmed in East Tennessee, and in the autumn of 1933, a photographer working for the government wrote down what he said. "I love my mountains, and I want to stay right here the rest of my life if I can." Then one more line on the card. "The reservoir will take his home." Remember him. We are coming back to where this camera found him next. The photographer was Lewis Hine. 25 years earlier, his pictures of children in the mills had helped write the child labor laws. In 1933, he worked for the Tennessee Valley Authority. He went into the field on the 20th of October and came out on the 25th of November. 6 weeks. He numbered the negatives 1 through 197. 190 of them survived. Construction on Norris Dam began on the 1st of October. Hine's first exposure is dated the 20th. He arrived 19 days behind the shovels. 7 years later, the authority published a technical report on the project. Page 59 explains what had not been done first. No studies had been made about moving the families off the land. There was no time, it says, because of the urgent need to relieve unemployment. So what Hine brought back is the closest thing to a survey of that valley before the water. He made it with a camera and a pencil. He wrote the captions himself. They carry names, road numbers, ages, acreage, and now and then a sentence somebody said to him. He started with the ground. Of the cleared patch on the hill, his caption says, "Land like that is arable a few years only. The topsoil washes away." Mrs. Sarah J. Wilson had lived 91 years on a farm near Bull's Gap. She still raised her own cotton. She did the carding, the spinning, and the weaving herself. At 91. Then he moved into the valley the water was going to fill. Wash day at the Stooksbury homestead. 350 acres dating back to the Civil War. This land will be submerged by the Norris Dam reservoir. That sentence, or one like it, is on more than 20 of these cards. It was October, so they were making molasses, grinding the cane. Oakdale School near Lewiston. The whole school came outside to be photographed. Sharp Station Methodist Church, also near Lewiston. The congregation is coming out at the close of the service. Inside on a Sunday afternoon. The caption names the preacher, Reverend Lovely. Both buildings stood inside the taking line. He also photographed a sign on the side of a barn. Pie Supper. Glen Alpine. Saturday night. Then he went house to house, and the captions turned into an address book. This family owns 2 acres and has always lived in the vicinity. A boy plowing a potato field with a mule and a bull-tongue plow. This farm, the caption says, is on the edge of the area to be flooded. Mr. Melton and his wife, getting ready for supper. Melton has used up the better part of his life in the mine. His boys run the farm. A house on the Andersonville Road that Hine labeled a squatter's home. It is a made-over houseboat. Harriet Hankins lived exactly where the new town was going to be built. He went inside. Harriet Hankins is 73 years old. At Bridges Chapel, he found Esco Glandon, a renter on land the reservoir would turn into an island. Note the drawings along the mantel, says the caption. They are his sons. Glandon rebuilt this cabin himself. He had lived here all his life, except for 3 years in a glass works in Kokomo, Indiana, at Gowan, the store and post office. Mr. J.C. Nicely had kept it for 30 years. Here he is, 70 years old, born and reared in Union County. His son ran the mill that ground their cornmeal, built 100 years ago. All of this region, the caption ends, will be deep underwater. On Lead Mine Bend, the homestead of Sherman Steiner. The prosperous and progressive farmer, Hine wrote. 1,500 acres, much of it going under. In the last week of the assignment, he spent an afternoon in one room at Lewiston, the home of Mrs. Jacob Stooksbury. She sat at the wheel for him. The creel behind her is used for measuring yarn by the hank. Now go back to -36. The man who said he wanted to stay in his mountains. -37. Curtis Stiner operating a circular saw at the Norris Dam site. Same hat, same wire glasses, same man. -38, the whole rig on the bank of the Clinch. The dam that was going to take his home was also the only work in the county. He took it. Most of the second half of this file is the same story. Foreman Clark and 2 shaft men at the mouth of the test tunnel. A rock driller working in the river itself, drilling in rock underwater. William L. Carden of Anderson County, acetylene burner. His helper that day was C.L. Hatmaker of Campbell County. On the 1st of November, they poured the first concrete. Hine's caption for that frame lists 17 men by name down to the water boy. J. Barley, Rural Route 2, La Follette at his outdoor ford. Hine wrote down what Barley told him. "I've just got to have a job. First I'm a blacksmith, next I'm a carpenter, or I'll do anything." The authority came to them. This is the store at Lead Mine Bend, kept by the same family whose 1,500 acres were going under. The man in the hat is E. H. Elam, an interviewer from the TVA Personnel Division explaining the methods of employment used by the authority. Another frame from the same afternoon. Look at the group in the background. Hine explains them. They are seeing who can pull up the most weight on the scales. Fletcher Carden, night watchman at the bunkhouses. His home stands on the site of the new town at Norris and will be moved. He has 12 children. On the 25th of November at the high school in Clinton, they sat the examination for skilled and unskilled labor. Grown men in overcoats at school desks waiting to be tested. This is the last negative Hine exposed on the assignment. One applicant, writing. In the middle of all this, he spent 4 days on something that looks unrelated. A hand at a book bindery up the valley, cutting index tabs. Hine writes down his name, his rural route, and his acreage. Then Hine drove 3 miles out of town and photographed him again on his own farm. Walter Hensley, head kiln fireman at the potteries at Elroy. He came to the potteries from a mountain farm, and this is where a pottery hand lived. Compare it to the cabin. Mrs. James Watson, 65, in her cabin near Gatlinburg. She spins wool yarn for the weavers at the settlement school and is paid for it. Something else was arriving that autumn. Civilian Conservation Corps boys sent to replant the watershed above the dam. These reached New Tazewell on the 17th of November in day coaches from New York. Tired and hungry, Hine wrote, but eager for their new life. For many of these boys, the caption adds, this was their first time away from home. Downstream from Lewiston, the government was building a town. On farmland it had just bought, the authority was starting a poultry demonstration center. The woman feeding its turkeys is named only as Mrs. Wallace. Hine photographed her once more at the spring. The caption ends, this spring has been in use for 30 years. Then he went home and the counting started. In the summer of 1934, the authority interviewed nearly 3,000 families who had to move. The final number in the report, 2,899 families on the land it bought. Most of them, it says, had lived in the same place for generations. Some of the difficulties were unusual. One owner asked the authority to agree that his pet frog could stay in a spring, where it had lived since its tadpole days. Some of the largest landowners felt they were being forced out for a new civilization in which they had little interest. A few considered starting a colony in Brazil. 41% were tenants who got no payment for land because they owned none. 140,000 acres went out of cultivation. Here is the number that carries the whole thing. Moving a household cost the median family about $50. The report notes in the same sentence that the reputed per capita annual spendable income for this area in 1935 was but $90. Almost nobody had to be forced. 5 families out of the whole 2,899 were put out by court order. By 1938, they had all gone. The report prints a chart of who was meant to help them, sorted into 5 boxes. Farmers with resources, farmers without, industrial families with resources and without, and sub-marginal families. It illustrates the houses it was buying with 2 photographs. Figure 239, representative of the better houses. Figure 240, the poorer houses. Hine had photographed houses like those with the people standing in front of them and written down their names. There was one more thing in that valley that had to be moved. The survey crews mapped 326 cemeteries holding 12,005 graves. Most were unmarked. Many dated from before 1800. The people of the valley, the report says, maintained an unusual reverence for these graves, even the unmarked ones. The nearest of kin were offered 3 choices in writing. 1. An undertaker of their own choosing would move the grave and the authority would pay him $20. 2. The authority would move the remains itself. 3. The grave would be allowed to remain as it was and be inundated. Of the contracts signed, 341 chose a private undertaker. 4,885 let the authority do it. 22 families chose the third one and left their dead where they were. 5 new memorial cemeteries took 4,389 of the reinterments. The work, the report records, was conducted to the general satisfaction of all concerned and entirely free from litigation. Norris Lake began filling on the 4th of March, 1936, when they closed the gates. Loyston is under it. Sharp Station is under it. So is Oakdale School. So is the Nicely Water Mill. So is the Stooksbury Place with its sorghum kettles. What is not under it is the file. 190 negatives in the National Archives, free to anyone who wants them. Because Lewis Hine wrote the captions himself. Almost nobody in it is anonymous. Curtis Stiner, Esco Glandon, Harriet Hankins, Fletcher Carden and his 12 children. There is one exception. Negative number 2. The whole caption reads, "No caption. Portrait of a man." He is the only person in this file the government photographed and did not write down. If you know who he is, the comments are open.